Adjourn informing me that at the hospital in Bermuda, that 8 workers will be made redundant. I get a little concerned about that, as I think most of us would, because I'm thinking about families. And I do know a few of those employees, they have children. Some are single parent homes that these folks work in. Mr. Speaker, these workers are due to be made redundant in June, I am told. We, the taxpayers of this country, last year we gave over $160 million as a grant to the hospitals, and this year is approximately the same figure. Mr. Speaker, I don't begrudge what people make in income, but it concerns me that we are going, not we, but the Bermuda Hospitals Board is going to send 8 folks home, and as people refer to sometimes as low-hanging fruit. And I don't mean that in any disrespectful way when I'm referring to those workers. But these workers are probably making about $50,000 to $60,000 a year. So they need every penny that they earn in order to live. I wouldn't say comfortably, because $60,000 today to a single household is really no money. Once you pay rent, food, and you got 3 other children to feed, and all the expenses that families have to incur trying to have a stable foundation for family, Mr. Speaker. What concerns me, Mr. Speaker, we have workers at that establishment making $500 plus, $300 plus, $400,000 plus. So it looks like in order to save money, we get rid of 8 workers that probably making $60,000 a year. 8 workers won't even pay enough, want for the highest paycheck down there. So we're going to get rid of 8 workers in order to keep one high-paying individual, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if the hospitals got to save money, just like the workers in this country went without a wage increase for, I think, 12 years. And even the politicians in this country, president, 15 years, no pay increase. And they are going to get rid of these folks, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know one person, they ran from government. They're wondering what's going to happen to them and their children. Where would they go? No worker in Bermuda today should have to go through that pain and agony. Here it is, March, and come June, they're gone. And then the next thing, they're in arrears and rent and everything else. And the family just dwindles away, dwindles apart, just slowly but surely, because they're not making any money, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, losing a job is tragic. That's the worst thing that can happen to a worker, particularly when those workers have been, as they understand, they're being let go because of the new system. They're putting down the hospital, the digital system. We shouldn't be putting in systems that get rid of people. We should try to move those people around. You tell me a hospital that big, we can get rid of 8 people, and then we can keep all these high-paying people? Why is it all the time the low-income person has to suffer? They are when you think of redundancies or terminations, is always the low-income people go first. They're the ones that that has to go through these traumatic experiences. They're the ones that if bread goes up by 20 cents, they feel it. That person making 500,000, 300,000, 200,000 really won't feel anything if your bread goes up 20 cents. And we all know in Bermuda right now, the cost of living, food, and it's not that Bermuda can do much better because we import just about 100% of everything.
True.
And we're faced with the cost of getting this food here. And then it's much more expensive to us because when a ship brings in food, they travel back empty. That is a cost to us, the importers of that product. Yes, it's going to be much more expensive. And these are the type of things that those workers who participate in paying taxes and helping to give a grant to the hospital. And now these folks that sit in high places is going to get rid of 8 workers, Mr. Speaker. I'm appalled at that. When I see our workers are going to suffer like that. I'm calling on the Bermuda Hospitals Board, the council, the ministry to get in there and save these workers. Because they were told that there won't be no cuts. Now they've been told this week that 8 of them is going to lose their jobs. How cool can people be when in a time we're just coming out of a pandemic and the government is doing its best, Minister for Labor and Economy doing his best to try to get investment in this country. The Premier out trying to do their best to try to get this country moving again. And in the midst of all of it, we got a government quango, let's call it that way, the hospital, who receives $160+ million from the taxpayer, is going to let 8 workers go. I plead on the good graces of God to step in and let these people come to their senses and save these jobs, because we cannot stand by and watch this happen, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to make a contribution tonight? I don't see anyone. Colonel? Minister of Works, you have the floor.
Yeah, I need this. I'd like to speak about the Fairmont Southampton Hotel, Mr. Speaker. Last night, several members of our caucus were invited to the Fairmont Southampton so that we could have a presentation on what they had planned for them. Now, you will know, Mr. Speaker, that many of us have waited with great anticipation to see some movement on that project. We followed meetings that they've had already with the people that live close to Fairmont Southampton as part of their outreach to the community to explain what it is that they're doing and to get buy-in. The opposition shouldn't worry. They're going to invite them too. You're going tomorrow. Good. Hopefully you'll be as excited as I am, and we were in that room last night, Mr. Speaker. I've been in favor of this project since the very beginning, since the hotel closed, that we should negotiate whatever is required in order to get that hotel open, is my view. Many countries have been providing concessions to hoteliers and getting hotels built in their country. We have floundered for decades because we think we're different, and we are in so many special ways. But the prospects of this opportunity will reap benefits for decades to come for Bermuda. And people just have to go and look at it with an open mind. During construction, there are going to be 1,000 jobs. So every Bermudian who wants to work or does work in the construction industry will be able to work. When the hotel opens, there's going to be 700 jobs working in hospitality. And the aim of this is to do what they've done before. And we've had a lot of people come into this country and a lot of people outreach to this country to offer us the world. And they talk. They don't deliver. But in the case of GenCom, they actually have a living example in this country. They own Tucker's Point. They purchased it when it was in debt and losing money and floundering. It is now a successful entity today, Mr. Speaker. And one of the questions last night was, what is the Bermudian split between Bermudians and foreign workers at Tucker's Point? And the presenter said he thought it was 85%. Mr. Speaker, today it was confirmed that is 92%. Fairmont Southampton had the same approach to not just have Bermudian waiters and housemaids and people working at the middle and lower level, but also at the senior level of the hotel. There is a plan to hire people before the hotel opens, because their philosophy is you learn best when you see a hotel in operation at the standard that they want elsewhere. And so they will send Bermudians to work in those hotels before this hotel reopens. Mr. Speaker, they made a presentation on, first on the hotel, because they're aware of developers coming into this country for decades and saying, I'll build a hotel if you let me build some condos first. Well, of course, nobody can attest to that, where you've had several entities that have come, they built the condos and we're still waiting for a hotel. In the case of Fairmont Southampton, they have made it crystal clear that the hotel will be refurbished, it will be open and operating before they even look to employ any of the benefits from an SDO. And the presentation that was made last night in terms of what they're going to turn it into, I think all of us that were in the room are familiar with the hotel. All of us have been there for functions or been into the Jasmine Lounge and enjoyed the facility. And so we were quite interested in some of the specific details of what this new entity is going to have, Mr. Speaker. I can't even describe what they're going to do down at the beachside other than to say that the tennis courts are going. And it's going to be a full entertainment center, as I understand it, with Bermudian entertainment, not just there, but throughout the property. They have the Bermudian way of doing things well on their agenda and plans to implement. There will be 9 restaurants in the hotel, Mr. Speaker, and I can imagine every Bermudian lining up to go and visit probably all 9 of them. Mr. Speaker, it was, we were there for 2 hours. We got a tour of the, they have been doing some work while the hotel is closed. I was quite surprised. They have, first we arrived at the hotel and they took us on a tour of the new rooms. And we went to the 4th floor and walked down, and there was carpet on the floor. They said, this is the old carpet, this is the new carpet. This is the old rooms, what they used to be, and these are the new rooms. And then we went to the Fairmont Gold floor and done exactly the same thing. And the quality and standard of furniture and furnishings in those rooms meet 5-star quality, Mr. Speaker. And the hotel management and organization is determined to raise the standard of care and delivery of services to visitors to this country. Mr. Speaker, this project now is going to cost $450 million. That's a lot of money. A lot of money. Probably the biggest investment that's ever been made in this country. Certainly more than the airport, which was claimed to be the biggest investment. Mr. Speaker, this investment in Bermuda does so many things. One, it demonstrates a commitment to Bermuda and to our country, and it also will send a signal to every other investor that have been thinking about Bermuda for the last 30 years and said, I ain't going there because it's too difficult. It's too expensive. It's too prohibitive. The government is not supportive of making this work. Mr. Speaker, this project will provide opportunities for Bermudians for generations to come. Mr. Speaker, as explained to us, the residences that they're going to build are not going to come until after the hotel is open. And so carry this through to its logical conclusion. If somebody comes and buys a residence in Bermuda, that means they're coming back. That means they're bringing their friends. That means they're sending their family. And we will get back to some of the old traditions of tourism in this country, where people came on spring break as college students and then graduated and came back as families and grandparents and great-grandparents. Mr. Speaker, I asked the question last night if the presentation was secret, because halfway through the presentation, I decided that I was going to say something in this House tonight to be in support of this project. I know that there are haters. I know they're not interested in facts. They're interested more in the PLP not succeeding with anything that helps our economy. Mr. Speaker, one of the questions that was asked, and it's in my mind every Tuesday, when? And that question was asked last night. And the answer is quite simple and painful. When you have a $450 million project with 5 entities trying to come to some agreement, you need to have a whole lot of lawyers making a whole lot of money, writing a whole lot of contracts, trying to get agreement. And that's what they've been doing for the last several months, Mr. Speaker, and continue to. They indicated they're in Bermuda to this week, doing the same thing. And so people can complain that we don't know a date, but think about this, Mr. Speaker. Would anybody who's in government be happy to not know a date as opposed to knowing a date? The opposition have criticized the premier up and down the country because he won't give them a date. The last time he gave them a date, it didn't materialize, and then they called him a liar. So the fact that he is not prepared to give a date, they're not prepared to give a date. They give a range. But I have every confidence, Mr. Speaker, that the people who are investing $450 million in Bermuda like making money. And as such, they're not happy that the hotel's not open and they're not able to make progress. But they're not going to be able to do that unless they can convince the people who are investing that every duck is in a row. And whilst it's not convenient, it's not desirable, not something we look forward to in having to wait, but the fact that there is progress that is being made off the radar and have been since the hotel closed, is an encouraging sign. Mr. Speaker, I draw a lot of comfort and confidence from the fact that the people that are doing the Fairmont Southampton, this is not their first rodeo. This is not their first hotel. And I'm talking globally, not just in Bermuda. The advantage we have is that there are a hotel operator here. And the number 2 person at that hotel is a Bermudian. So they have demonstrated their commitment, not just to Bermuda, but to any country that they're going to operate in. Common sense would dictate that it is better to have Bermudians in Bermuda serving you, Colombians in Colombia, Americans in America, than a whole lot of foreigners that can't tell you the best place to get a fish sandwich. Mr. Speaker, this opportunity for Bermuda is huge. And I would invite those people that disagree with everything the PLP does, even if they agreed with it yesterday. If we suggested they're going to disagree, I would invite them to just pause and reflect and look at why would these people, if the PLP is so bad at encouraging and developing investment, why would these people talk to us if they didn't think they were going to make some money and make a success of this exercise? It makes no sense, Mr. Speaker. It makes no common sense. We are in a position to be able to facilitate the rejuvenation of this country. Every unemployed electrician, carpenter, painter, non-experienced worker will have an opportunity to get a job, will have an opportunity to get a career. Part of their remit is to invest and to support education in this country, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Education was in the room last night and indicated to them that the next signature school, I knew we would begin with an S, the next signature school is going to be hospitality. And so therefore, there will be opportunities for those people to be employed in the industry, and Fairmont have indicated that they'll be first in line looking to employ them and to support them and to train them and to develop them and to promote them. Mr. Speaker, this is a huge opportunity for Bermuda, and it would be nice on this one occasion if we agreed it was a good opportunity and that we were all going to support their effort. Some of the comments coming out of, as reported by them, coming out of the meetings that they had with members of the community were attended mostly by, I think, by the MP for constituency 30, MP Jason Mead, who reported that 90% of the people, and let me not use that number, most of the people who attended, their one question was, when are you going to start? And that's the question that is on many Bermudians' mind. Let me just say a few things, Mr. Speaker, about SDOs and the fact that the hotel has one and is applying for a new one, another one. Mr. Speaker, in the interest of transparency, they produced on slide the 2009 SDO, and then they overlaid it with the 2023 SDO. Mr. Speaker, there is a marginal increase in the amount of real estate that they're going to use for the new SDO. And I know that the conservationists, well, they've already started about their criticism, Mr. Speaker. And let me just say something that I said today in relation to another matter to the media. We as a country cannot afford to save every old building in this country and refurbish it. Not possible. And so when people start squealing about clearing of trees on Turtle Hill, Mr. Speaker, I live in eyesight of the Fairmont Southampton Hotel and have done for a number of years. Most of those trees are calcareous. Most of those trees should be cut down and developed. And I think that, Mr. Speaker, we have to stop being the country of no. We have to stop being the people of no. Forget that the PLP is in charge. That's the reality of our existence right now. Nobody complained when the OBA let St. Regis build a hotel. Now, it didn't open until we came, but it's the nature of this type of government that we run. We start on a path, and if we lose the government, they pick up the ball and carry it, and vice versa. Mr. Speaker, this is going to provide opportunities for Bermudians for generations to come. And if anybody wants to just casually look at the progress of this and the work that is going to be available from a construction point of view, decades of building in this country, Mr. Speaker. And I would encourage everybody in this country to exhale. I got it, Mr. Speaker. Everybody in this country to exhale and look at what is being presented factually. And by that, you probably can go on a website or there'll probably be public opportunities for people to go and hear from the people direct and ask the questions direct. Don't believe us. Don't believe them. Go and get the evidence for yourself and recognize that this is going to be a significant contribution to this country and to our benefit, all of our benefit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to add a few things to what Colonel Burke said, which I thought it was important to follow right after. First of all, in the presentation, one of the things that they did say was that they would be sending Bermudians overseas to train them. So they were committed to Bermudianization. Also, the residents that are going to be built are not fractional. They're going to be totally owned by the persons who bought them. The other thing, and I guess I was one of those people as well, who didn't fully understand what was going to be happening with GEMCOM. So they have also made a commitment to have town hall meetings all around the island so it can be transparent, so people are not concerned what GEMCO is doing, and also to get an understanding of what the guarantee is. They also specify that with the SDO, it's going to be 30% of the property, the green property, that was going to be built on, because they were not going out, they were going up. Also, in terms of the 1,000 people that will be working, they did clarify that they were going to have people working 14 hours a day, and they felt that this project, once started, would be completed within 12 months, 12 to 16 months. The final thing they said was they are not just committed to a party, they are committed to the people of Bermuda. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Simmons-Wade. Minister Hayward, would you like to make a contribution?
Certainly, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. Mr. Speaker, since I last spoke in this Honorable House on the motion to adjourn, it seems as though my comments have created quite astir. Last Friday, I used my time to articulate that no matter how much you extend your hand to try to work with a certain group of individuals, they will turn right around and use your generosity to undermine you. We have this false notion of collaboration. What has been evident since I last spoke is that the reality that I spoke about has manifested itself. We've seen clear manifestation of where a group of people deliberately design a strategy to try to undermine individuals. Deliberately take one line out of a speech to tell the public or create a narrative that I don't care about persons' votes. It started on Sunday with MP Dockley on social media, followed by a Mr. Dakudo on social media, followed by the OBA's chairman, deliberately taking a statement, pulling it out of context to create a narrative. I guess that's politics. But it goes directly to what I was explaining. Many don't like the examples I used. But Mr. Speaker, that is the reality. That the OBA government are not interested in working with the Progressive Labour Party government. The reality is they will use every opportunity, including sound bites, to create a narrative to deliberately undermine individuals. What was attempted from my lens was they attempted to assassinate my character. Not one mention that I said individuals who I go to the houses and they put their dogs out. And then I see those individuals at the polls and they say, you haven't came to my house, that I'm not interested in their vote. I said it last week. And I shared their sentiments. But how come it was no dogs in the story that the One Bermuda Alliance sent out? How come they did not speak to a greater level of humanity when persons go to knock on persons' doors and one sets an animal on a human being? No mention of that. Just that Hayward don't support people that don't look like him or don't agree with him. Where did the OBA get that from? That wasn't included as part of my speech. You know what? They don't like what I said or how I said it. So they done what's in their playbook, attack. But Mr. Speaker, I guess that their aim was that I'll be silenced, that I'm forced to come out and retract statements, that I pivot in my position. Mr. Speaker, I'm a free black man, and I'll use the floor of this House to speak my truth, as everybody in this House has an opportunity to speak their truth. I'll continue to speak my reality. And Mr. Speaker, being free means you accept the consequences of your words. But if I say something and I mean it, I'll stand by it. But this twisting around words to create a whole fictitious narrative that did not exist, I can't understand that. Or maybe I can, because I trust the OBA to be exactly who they are. And they continue to show themselves as that. And this is a manifestation of that. Caused so much of a stir that has caused the political party I belong to put out some sort of qualifying statement, because they have so much of the public in an uproar based off of the narrative that they have created. And it's not just them, it's their media outlet that they use as well. The article says that I tell people who don't agree with me or don't like what I'm doing or don't approve of the work that I'm doing, that I don't want their votes. Where did the World Gazette get that from? They have one portion of what I said in quotes and created a whole fictitious narrative around it. I woke up this morning to Hayward being rebuked by the Premier. Mr. Speaker, I grew up in the AME church. The only time I've heard rebuke used is for the devil. That's the only time in my entire life I have heard rebuke used is when somebody's referring to Satan. But then if I say the paper's trying to demonize me, I'm delusional. It's wrong, Mr. Speaker. But this is the political game that we're in. I hope each and every one of us understand the playing field. I hope the OBA are clear that notwithstanding what they do, what type of traction they get in the media, all of the negative comments that are associated with my name, that I will not be silenced. I will not be muzzled. I will not be muted. I'll speak my truth. That's all I have, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I made a statement in this House that has offended the OBA, that the dirty does not need the six. Mr. Speaker, I stand by that statement 100%. The dirty do not need the six. Secondly, if an individual sets their dog upon me when I'm canvassing, I do not want their vote. That is my truth, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that it will set me free. And I'm accountable for the words that I just spoke. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Does any other member wish to have such a word? Opposition whip, you have your 20 minutes. I mean, government whip, I'm sorry.
Thank you,
Government
Mr.
whip.
Speaker. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Speaker. I really had no intent on speaking tonight, certainly on a conversation that you and I had earlier. You would
Yes.
know that I had no intention to speak because the duties of the government whip
Have a good evening.
distracts me to doing things behind the scenes. So I hadn't even prepared myself to speak. So I will be brief. And I'm going to go along the lines of my colleague who just sat down. And having seen yesterday's World Gazette, where my honorable colleague was highlighted on the front page at that, it did disturb me. And I slapped on it. I hadn't spoken to him because I knew if I had spoken to him, he'd have told me he doesn't need me to defend him. And he's obviously done it himself tonight. But I do feel that I need to say something publicly, especially when he's been described as delusional arrogance. I know the honorable member a little better than that. As I said, and I'm sure he's looking at me now and he's probably even saying, I'm going to tell you, Terrell, later, I don't need you to defend me. But as I said, I will continue. One of the reasons why I am going to continue, Mr. Speaker, is that it's Jason today. Sorry, the honorable member, Jason Hayward today. And it could be any other of us on this side tomorrow. So I do believe I will defend my honorable colleague. Mr. Speaker, over this side of the House, we tend to use the term sometimes the combined opposition. We say it in joke sometimes, but it obviously has some validity to it. What I'm going to say is that I think the combined opposition, without naming who we think they are, has had some additional recruits, 3 in particular, who feel that one, because he's learned, knows so much. 2, because the other one thinks he's a historian, and I think he sometimes rewrites history. And 3, well, let me say for all 3, I think, Mr. Speaker, you've heard the term, is nothing, the wrath of a woman scorned. Well, I'm going to say it must obviously apply to those 3. I won't call their names, but I'll certainly leave it at that. Because let me say, all 3, I think, had some interest in this Progressive Labor Party at one time. Mr. Speaker, my honorable colleague, I know him as a good man, a good father, husband, brother, uncle, and cousin to many. And I certainly know him as a good friend. He's a friend to me. He is very passionate about what he thinks and his actions. No, let me say that his words, and again tonight, he's basically said what he's had to say. I personally may not have said it in the way he said it, but I can certainly say from personal experience that I've experienced the same things in my canvassing, and people know that I canvass. It is no secret. People know I canvass regularly. And yes, people set dogs on you, or you knock on their doors and they act as if they're not home, and the cars are there. And so sometimes what I do is I take the phone from one of my colleagues who travels with me, and I dial the number, and somebody answers. But they won't answer the knock, because you know why? They looked out the window and saw the green shirts. And they know what the green shirt means. The Progressive Labor Party is on site. So they're not bothered to open the door. Mr. Speaker, let me say, as I said, I wasn't really prepared for this, but I think my honorable colleague just said that none of basically what he said the other night was what was reported in the paper. I certainly think it was taken out of context, and his context was more local than international, as they're trying to say it's going to disturb. It was a local example that he gave. And I think international people are a lot more smarter than to think that my honorable colleague would say something like, I don't need your vote, and take it that far that has been taken by the Royal Gazette. So again, I say that it's been taken out of context. I know the honorable member, he means well, he has a good heart, and I would certainly always encourage him. He encourages me, so I certainly will encourage him. Mr. Speaker, I'll just probably end by saying that life of an MP in Bermuda is a strange animal. We all know each other. You run into each other often. I live in my constituency, so as soon as I come out of my gate, I've got constituents stopping me, waving to me, and they obviously think they own you. They do. So I can understand after a long day that my colleague had the other night, he was probably frustrated and expressed what was on his mind. But I will end by saying he is a good man. I know him well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Someone behind you. MP Swan?
Mr. Speaker, I feel duty bound to just weigh in a little bit on a subject I know very well. Through golf, I would have had practice in how division is manifested. I'm just going to cast our minds back to December 2nd, 2015, a report that was done by a joint select committee in this House that revealed that there was little said about some of the findings that took place and were uncovered, of some of the participation that went even further than people sucking dogs on people in their house, when people didn't even come forth and own up to the fact that they may have participated in persons being pepper sprayed and the like. And if someone went back and really truly looked at some of the reports and some of the things that took place and some of the statements that were given by Ms. Holzhauser and Mr. Kenny Bascom that revealed that there was a great deal more than people were prepared to admit to, it would speak to some of the real divisions that exist in this country. I know very well, Mr. Speaker, that in this country, and I've spoken to it many times, when a political party plans its course around deliberate polarization, when the white community in this country, 95% can pretty much guarantee where they're going to vote, no matter how good that particular party is and how badly they may have been performing, would hold their nose and move in one direction and then craft a course around ciphering 20% of the black vote in order to get some type of victory in a marginal area, or 25%. That is the definition of polarization. You know it very well, Mr. Speaker. You know how it exists. And in my earlier speech on the Monday following the budget reply, I gave credit to two young men in particular on our side who spoke that day, MP Joshe Adams and Minister Jason Hayward, for their presentation and what I look to the future for them to hold for this country. And one thing that I've learned through standing in 1983 and toiling in the vineyard and finally getting elected in 2007 and serving for 9 years is that one of the playbooks of the UBP and the OBA is to attack leadership, attack leaders. I think PLP is no secret why people would call it the Byrd administration. There's no reason why it would call it the Smith administration. There's no reason why they would call it the Cox administration. Because if you can attack a leader sufficiently, you start breeding trying to create some type of division, and we've seen that. Attack the leader, call everybody corrupt, keep fanning that type of narrative. The young minister Hayward, who I have a great deal of respect for, among others in our party, who are both on the front and back benches, are advancing a very important initiative that the former government, OBA, got wrong. They try to do parallels, but they force-fed people. They say, take it or leave it. They cause people to march and get all wound up, and they pepper sprayed them, and then engage lawyers to protect themselves from being able to really disclose what was going on. While they engage in the politics of not getting to know the community. And I understand it, Mr. Speaker, because for years in politics, sitting with the conservatives of this country, I was never good enough to be considered for a safe seat, save and except for Southampton West when Ralph was alive and Harry was alive, or giving it up, and I wasn't ready then. Never good enough for a pageant. No, why? Because I spoke out on subjects similar to today. Spoke up on independence. Stood at the pearls for independence. Tell people today I spoke, but stand up for everyone in this country, irrespective. Understand? Tell them, look, your opinion is valuable there. But this young minister is advancing something in a very good way. Growing the labor force in order so that there's a tax base sufficient enough, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that you and I can have a pension in 5 years. That's important. And it's how you go about doing things as a government that causes a country to move forward. And you would have it, they would have it, that this government doesn't care about the economy. They come up here and put a book on the economy on everyone's desk, like we're stupid and don't know economy, and wouldn't even tell you that when the PLP gave the Butterfield Bank a $250 million guarantee back in 2008, or at the cusp of the recession, yes, that probably the person who was the author of that book was the deputy chairman, thereabouts, of that bank that went into serious financial trouble. But you don't hear about that. You don't hear about the decisions that were made in boardrooms back in the mid-2000s that caused the economy to collapse like a stack of cards. You don't hear about decisions how Bermudians, working class people, used to leave their money out in their gas tubes for persons like my cousin, Mr. Powell. I said my cousin, Mr. Powell, to come by, collect my mama's money for her insurance or her life policy, and that gets evaporated. Why? Through boardroom decisions. Brother Derek spoke about how working class jobs are being eradicated, but we saw an economy eradicated. And you know what the narrative came from the conservatives? And I raised my hand. I understand it better than most. Was that it was the PLP's fault. The PLP caused a global recession on the backdrop of the most buoyant economic miracle this country experienced between 2002, 2007 before. And probably the only mistake wasn't putting enough beans away, like where Mr. Cox had that not retirement fund. It was a sufficient fund unemployment fund. Right. That was one of our visionaries had put that, and during the buoyancy, no one was reckoning that a global recession. And so the workers of this country get short shrift because when the union realized that the country was in trouble, the first group of people to really embrace that there was a recession was the hotel workers of Bermuda that took a pay cut at the triennial down at the Liberty Theater there, Congress. I said, wow. And that pay cut stayed in place for quite a long time. Why? Because they wanted to preserve jobs. And so there's been a tremendous level of disingenuity in this country. And a lot of the division stems from the fact that and you have to, when I was a young man, Dr. Eva Hudson always used to talk about slavery. But our root problems are caused by our origins. In Britain today, you've got people who benefited from the sugarcane industry in Jamaica and places like that are having second looks at the generational wealth that they accumulated and the impact that that's having on persons who come from those communities. And I believe in my heart of hearts that there are people in Bermuda that are afraid of that narrative chickens coming home to roost in Bermuda. And I share that. I tell people, on all my sides, I've looked back on who I am. I'm a Rattray, I'm a Anderson, I'm a Hull, I'm a Boris, I'm a Higginbottom. I know where these families' origins come. And so when I walk in St. George's, I know, hey, a lot of people don't look at me as St. George's, but I know that my families come from way back and they go on both sides of the political divide. But I noticed that the white community aren't as honest and forthcoming, because when you are the beneficiaries of a system that's been set up on wrong decisions, there were laws that made what people did wrong right. And so when the system has been built on that type of foundation, there are people who have benefited, who are still benefiting, that don't want to go back and look at that. But we have to examine that. And young people look at it a little bit differently than when I was younger. I probably looked at it a little bit differently. Certainly my experiences as I traveled around the South all by myself under the protection of the Almighty God and people that he put me in good people that he put in contact with that shielded me from some things, Mr. Speaker. But that's the reality of this country. And the Royal Gazette is an institution founded on the very racist foundations that we have to get over in this country. And let me tell you this, we could be black and carry that ball just as well, knowingly and unknowingly. There's nothing wrong with being ignorant sometimes. Something wrong with it when it's harmful. Something very wrong with it when people might know that you're ignorant and play you. And there's a lot of playing going on. I tell people, ask the Honorable Wayne Fairmont. He'll tell you how the numbers work. Look at a situation, so forth. And so I'm just here to say that the days of the consultants' playbooks that come here, that come in this house, that say this to win people over, say this will tickle them up and divide them. That project up at Fairmont Southampton, Princess, that SDO that I'm prepared to support is taking place on land that my great grandmother Boris Hall Not by the cycle shop. I asked my Uncle Bill, 92 years old, where did Granny earn that land that was compulsory required that Ms. Braun Evans represented and got her 7 times more than what or 5 or 7 times more than what the government wanted to give at the time. And he said right up there by the cycle shop. I thought it was over by the golf shop, but he said no, it's around by the cycle shop. And I'm here to say that it's a national imperative. People are saying, what you going to do with the economy? But when you look and see that when the Southampton Princess was first built opened in 1970, you had Lantana, now closed. You had Sonesta, now closed. You had Belmont Hotel, now closed. You had Elba Beach, now closed. You had Horizons, now closed. You had Glencoe, now non-existent. And so what you're going to do also have is a residential component that leases back a certain amount of the year hotel beds. And I would guarantee anyone that goes there, ask them, quantify, if the building in phases, that segment, how many bed nights does that equate to? Because it's significant. Because you can't come here and criticize the government because there's no air service, and then the government is trying to get the beds put back in place. And then you can't have it both ways. You can't criticize us for doing that and then try to put stumbling blocks just to score political points. The best example that any opposition has in this country of how to be a good opposition, take a page out of my book. When I was a senator from 1998 to 2007, the first opposition, we had a library that I studied, was the Progressive Labor Party government opposition with just 7 members in the House. 7 faithful members. And 3 dynamic members in the Senate. They came with solutions. And you know what the government do here? Took a lot of them. And they got my managers and said, why you buy sterile ideas? That's your job. Come with solutions so people could see you as solution-oriented. Stop trying to criticize. Stop playing that race card because you've been built on racism. Institutions are racist from the origins. That's why people went out of their way to get rid of the UBP. But I always used to say, you can run, but you can't run away from yourself. You took the same thing and transported to another name, the same structure. And what I'm trying to tell you is, there's a way out of this. Start working for the people. Start coming with some solutions. This government is trying to rebuild this economy. I shouldn't be here today. I should be somewhere else. I only came back because a very sick child says, Daddy, you gotta go home and do what you can. That's what you came into this house for. You came here, you did what you did at 25. You waited 25 more to go home. I'm gonna get better. And I'm telling you, take a page out of the PLP's book. You're down to nothing. Stop playing that old UBP playbook. I understand it better than you. I was trained by him. I grew up in it. And I'm telling you, I can see it. That's how come I had to point an order code, because I knew where you were going. And I know that although some people could have plausible deniability and say, I didn't see that document, I know that there are some people that know what's going on. That's the way it happens. And when you're, and it's the narrative, because what they'll tell you is, I've always been passionate. It says you're emotional. No, that's who I am. Some people, that's who I am. I'm Peter Anderson's grandson, the man that used to push his boat out in the middle of Scotland and give a sermon. I never met him. He's in my DNA. And I'm happy to say it's got a better version of him coming behind me. It's got a better version of coming behind me. Peter Anderson's offspring. from Soul Cattle too. The Andersons, Earl Anderson's people. Absolutely. But you have to know who your peoples are and know what your foundation is built on. And don't be ashamed of it. Make something better of it. Because there's some persons who are beneficiaries of some things that oppressed other people. And we have to do better. Take a pit, study. If you want to study somebody, you want to study what an opposition is, I'm going to give you seven reasons, 7 subjects to study. I can do it in 1 minute. Walter Roberts, Walter Lister, Stanley Lowe, Reginald Boris, Dame Lewis Brown Evans, Freddie Wade, Otterville Simmons, the 7 that stood firm, stood strong on their backs in the 60th anniversary. I used to go to Berkeley, and although when I was a young man, I knew I wanted to be in politics, I used to look from Somerset and count my relatives, the Ratchers, the Roberts, the Halls, absolutely. They're all in the house. The Mortons, Hudson, up and down the country. But look at that faithful 7 and then the 3 in the Senate. Smith, Allen, and Scott. Issues they dealt with. Solutions. They spoke on education. They spoke on law and order. They spoke on tourism. And they carried the message. That's my time.
Thank you, MP. Premier, you have your 20 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And it is good to certainly be in the House tonight, and we've heard a few things on motion to adjourn today. My morning started slightly aggravated because I awoke to a newspaper headline that the Minister of the Economy and Labor quoted so well, where it says that Burt rebukes Hayward. And I want to read the very first line from the Royal Gazette story, Mr. Speaker. It starts like this, and I quote, David Burt has rebuked Jason Hayward, the Minister for Economy and Labor, for stating that he, in bold, does not need the votes of people. This is in bold on their website for the record. Does not need the votes of people. It goes on to say, who think he is not engaging with them or doing a good job. End quote. Now, Mr. Speaker, we've all heard the Hansard. We've seen the Hansard. And fortunately, there are balanced media organizations in this country, such as Bermuda, who put the entirety of the minister's speech up for persons to hear. And what the minister said was very clear. There are people who sick their dogs on him and then come around and says, I didn't see you at my house. Now, Mr. Speaker, you have canvassed far longer than me. So I'm sure you have experienced the exact same thing. I'm sure that there are many members in this house on this side who have had dogs sent out on them, Mr. Speaker. It is unfortunate. But again, Mr. Speaker, here we see precisely what the Minister for Economy and Labor spoke about, precisely what the honorable member just took his seat, precisely what the government whip spoke about. It is the penchant of the daily newspaper of this country to misrepresent facts, misrepresent positions, take and twist words to form a narrative. So, you know how the game is played. We understand very clearly. Mr. Speaker, I'm a student of politics, so I get it. But there should be absolutely no shock and surprise over on Parlerville Road when members of this House say that the Royal Gazette and the One Bermuda Alliance is the combined opposition. No surprise. And I'll just say this, because I'm certain he's listening. If the editor of the Royal Gazette does not like that, if the editor of the Royal Gazette and the persons who may happen to have shares in Bermuda Press Holding or otherwise don't like that, then they need to stop acting like it. Stop printing the One Bermuda Alliance's press releases as gospel. Because if the headline of your newspaper accuses a minister of this government of saying something that he did not say, no quotes, no reference to what the One Bermuda Alliance said, just who think he is not engaging with them or doing a good job. Nonsense, Mr. Speaker. And all I can say is, Mr. Speaker, that is why persons consider that newspaper a tabloid. Because it is nonsense. I do want to refer, of course, Mr. Speaker, to something that was put out by the One Bermuda Alliance yesterday by, their new chair who's there. And I understand clearly what's going on in OBA headquarters because, they're trying to take as much attention off of their absolute lack of any coherent economic policy for this country. They're trying to take the attention off of any lack of a coherent ability to actually mount coherent policy positions in this honorable House. They're trying to let people forget that in official statements, they had to retract items that were published, probably still on their website, forgetting that they had to rescind 16% of their policy positions over the weekend. They want people to forget that, to try to divert and distract attention. And here's the funny thing that I saw in the One Bermuda Alliance's press release. It says, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, "I thought one of Mr. Hayward's roles was to attract foreign investment to the island, not cause alienation," end quote. Well, I'm here to tell you this, Mr. Speaker. I have canvassed houses with many members of this party. And many times we knock on the doors and there is someone who is a foreign investor. I remember one day I was canvassing with the the junior minister who ran in constituency number 12, who sits in another place. And I knocked on the door of someone who I'd seen just a few weeks earlier in an international business meeting talk about stuff. And we struck up a conversation. But guess what, Mr. Speaker? He didn't set his dog on me. He didn't set his dog on us. And I can promise you, Mr. Speaker, that there is no foreign investor that is coming to this country that when a member of a political party knocks on a door, they will send their dog out to get them. So let us be real. And there was a little bit of, how would I say, comedy earlier today, as the minister and I were leaving one meeting with international investors and going to another meeting of international investors, where the international investors were complimenting that same honorable minister for the work in progress of which he has been able to achieve in advancing the government's economic agenda. That's what we were hearing on the doorsteps of Pitts Bay Road. Far different than what you would see on the newspaper or the paper that gets printed out of Parleville. And it was funny because the minister and I were chuckling. And he says, well, I guess, this is what people do walking down the street the same day that you are rebuking others. But the minister and I have a great relationship. And the fact is, if the minister was to be rebuked, he would be sitting in this house today as a backbencher. But we in this party value his work. We in this party value his passion. He is one of the hardest working ministers I have ever worked with, delivering time and time again, taking on additional items in his portfolio and executing them well, Mr. Speaker. That is recognized not just in this country, not just in this house or in this party, but as I said, down on Pitts Bay Road, in the boardrooms where persons are grateful for the work, energy, and attention in which he gives to his portfolio, the detailed way in which he goes about his work. But here's what I'll say, Mr. Speaker. Because we know how the game is played. And it is clear that at the Music Box, they're in full election mode. It is clear. And that is okay, because rest assured, this Progressive Labor Party government will be ready. But what will happen is, Mr. Speaker, we will go back to the country with a record of accomplishment. That is what we will do. And where you heard the Honorable Minister say earlier today that the efforts of the combined opposition to muzzle him, to try to paint him into a corner will not be successful, I co-sign on that because it's not. Because as I said today, we were back doing the work of which we did. Let me be clear, Mr. Speaker. The Honorable Minister for the Economy and Labor has responsibility for the Bermuda Business Development Agency. The same Bermuda Business Development Agency that put on a magnificent risk summit that attracted a number of people to this island, doubled the attendance last year, had fully funded with sponsors, and was a success by all persons who attended, Mr. Speaker. That's the work that we are doing. There is no mistaken error, Mr. Speaker, that over the last 3 years, the number of jobs that have grown in international business are by 15%. That doesn't happen by accident, Mr. Speaker. It takes work, energy, effort, and a Minister of Labor before, and a Minister of Economy and Labor who does what is necessary to ensure that the workforce is ready, that the labor that is required to grow our economy can be supplied, and that we continue to have economic growth. And the policies that have been put in place have meant that in that growth in international business, there have been more Bermudians hired than those who have coming from overseas. Many people want to forget, Mr. Speaker, but I am not going to let the people forget. And just like I said inside of our budget statement, we are going to tell our own story. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to end with a quote. I'm going to say that one more time, a quote. And it is something that Prime Minister Mia Mottley shared with me when we were in Barbados last year. And of course, we are both leaders who have large parliamentary majorities, hers far larger than mine. And we are leaders that experience the same rough and tumble when you are firm in your vision and your conviction to move things ahead. And I will close today with this quote. She said, "Some newspapers should be in the paper business, but maybe not the newspaper business, as their paper is better used in the restroom." Good night, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Premier, thank you for your contributions tonight. Members, everyone's trying to get a chuckle there. I'm going to avoid that one. Everyone have a good evening, get rested up, and we'll see you back here at 10 a.m. on Friday morning.